The flames clawed at the sky. Wind screamed through the trees as fire danced along the edge of Prophetstown, lighting the tangled underbrush in unnatural gold. The smell was thick, wet smoke, scorched hides, charred corn, and the noise, God, the noise. Musket fire, horse screams, the deep, shaking cries of men caught between sleep and slaughter. It wasn't a battlefield, not yet. It was a nightmare, one William Henry Harrison had walked into willingly. They had come to break the back of a dream, a native confederacy, a rebellion before it began. But as his men scrambled through mud and darkness, Harrison realized too late, dreams don't go quietly. They burn. The road to Prophetstown had begun long before the soldiers marched. For decades, land had been changing hands, on paper, in council houses, at gunpoint. The Treaty of Fort Wayne in 1809 had sliced through native-held territory, ceding millions of acres in what is now Indiana and Illinois. But many tribes hadn't agreed to the terms. Some hadn't even been consulted. Others, like the Miami and Potawatomi, signed only under pressure. Tecumseh called it fraud. Theft signed in silence, and Tecumseh would not be silent. He was Shawnee, born during war, raised among loss, hardened by exile. As a child, he had seen white cabins rise where buffalo once roamed. He had watched rivers renamed. His father was killed by settlers, his people driven from Ohio. But Tecumseh didn't just carry grief. He carried a vision. No single tribe could resist the Americans alone, but together they might stand. He believed the land was sacred and indivisible, that no tribe had the right to sell it without the consent of all. His vision wasn't just military, it was spiritual. And for that, he turned to his brother. Tenskwatawa, the open door, the prophet. Once a drunkard, a cast-off, an embarrassment. But after a sudden vision during a trance, he emerged transformed. He claimed the spirits had shown him a path, a purification of native life, free from whiskey, white goods, and corruption. He preached resistance, not just of arms, but of spirit. Reject the settlers, return to the old ways, and the land would be healed. Together, Tecumseh and Tenskwatawa formed a movement that swept like fire across the Great Lakes and down the Mississippi. Warriors came, elders came, women and children came. From the Delawares, the Kickapoo, the Sauk, the Ottawa. They came to the banks of the Wabash and Tippecanoe, to Prophetstown. It rose not as a town, but as a declaration. Longhouses lined the river. Smoke curled from cooking fires. Children played between lodges. Horses grazed in open meadows. And in its center stood the prophet's lodge, a place of song, vision, and prayer. They trained there, danced there, made ready there. And Washington grew nervous. William Henry Harrison, governor of the Indiana Territory, had long kept one eye fixed on Prophetstown. He had a reputation, shrewd, ambitious, unshakably committed to expansion. He saw land not as heritage but as leverage, and Prophetstown, built without permission, peopled by what he called hostiles, was a threat to everything he was trying to build. In 1810, Tecumseh and 400 warriors marched into Vincennes to confront him. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a warning. Tecumseh stood tall, his voice cold and measured. The treaties, he said, were invalid. The land belonged to all. He accused Harrison of deception, manipulation, and greed. Harrison tried to defend himself, said the law was the law. Tecumseh laughed. Laws could not sell the dead. The confrontation nearly ended in violence, but Tecumseh left, promising to return. He would travel south, he said, to rally the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw. He would form a wall of warriors stretching from Canada to the Gulf, and Harrison knew he couldn't let that happen. In the fall of 1811, Tecumseh was gone. Harrison saw an opening. He requested federal troops, organized local militia, brought in volunteers. His force numbered around 1,100, many green, poorly armed, but eager for glory. They marched north under a banner of preemption. Harrison claimed he wouldn't attack unless forced, but the supplies they carried told a different story. They brought powder, shot, bayonets, and torches. On November 6th, they arrived within sight of Prophetstown. Tenskwatawa sent envoys, offered to speak with Harrison in the morning. To some in the town, it felt like a trap. To others, a desperate plea for peace. Harrison agreed, but he ordered his army to camp on a ridge just outside the village, Burnett's Meadow. It was poor ground, wooded, exposed on 3 sides, and backed by a swamp. But the high ground gave a sense of security. He set sentries, lit fires, then slept. Inside Prophetstown, the prophet was praying. He claimed the spirits had spoken. The Americans would attack, but the people, his people, would be protected. The bullets would pass through them like wind. The warriors would be invisible in the trees. Some doubted, but the prophet sang louder. He mixed roots, burned sacred herbs. He spoke in tongues. The spirits, he said, demanded blood. At 4:45 a.m., a burst of gunfire shattered the trees. The Americans had been ambushed in their sleep. Screams cut through the fog. War cries erupted in all directions. Native warriors surged from the underbrush, some with muskets, others with spears, clubs, tomahawks. They hit the outer pickets first, then the main camp. Dozens of tents collapsed under the first rush. The soldiers scrambled for weapons. Many fought barefoot, half-dressed, stumbling in darkness. Drummers beat out alarms. Officers shouted commands that were lost in the din. The smoke clung to the ground like a curse. Major Joseph Davies mounted a counterattack, charged a line of advancing warriors. He was shot through the abdomen. His horse reared and threw him. His men tried to drag him back, but the line collapsed. Davies bled out before dawn. The prophet's warriors fought with unmatched ferocity. They struck from trees, ducked behind logs, moved in complete silence between volleys. Their aim was not to destroy the army, but to disorient it, drive it into retreat, break morale, but the lines held. Harrison, woken by the commotion, took control. He ordered his troops to form a V-shape around the camp, anchoring their flanks on the woods. He rallied reserves, directed artillery. The small cannons roared into the trees, ripping open the underbrush. Smoke hung in thick sheets. The fighting raged for over 2 hours. Bodies littered the earth, some still alive, groaning in the mud. The wounded screamed for water. Musket barrels glowed red-hot. Soldiers passed powder by hand when their horns ran dry. And still the prophet chanted. From a hill beyond the river, he raised his arms and sang. He told his warriors they could not die. But as the light crept over the horizon, that illusion shattered. One by one, the warriors began to fall back. By sunrise, they were gone. The camp lay in ruin. Dozens of Americans were dead. Nearly 200 wounded, horses lost, tents burned, rifles shattered. The wounded moaned in rows. Harrison's surgeons worked without pause, sawing limbs, packing wounds, praying over the dying. But Prophetstown had been abandoned. Its people had fled, into woods, across the river, carrying what little they could. Harrison ordered the town destroyed. They burned the longhouses, the food stores, the winter supplies. Sacred objects were tossed into fire pits, bones, tools, prayer bundles, all of it consumed in flame. What couldn't be burned was shattered. And then they left. Harrison returned to Vincennes and declared victory. In Washington, he was hailed a hero, a warrior governor. The papers printed his name in bold. Songs were written, medals were promised. Years later, he would run for president under the name Old Tippecanoe. But Tecumseh returned to find only ash, his capital gone, his people scattered, his brother disgraced, the alliance fractured. But he did not retreat. He rallied what remained, turned to the British, and threw everything he had into the coming war. In 1813, Tecumseh would fall in battle. But the idea he carried, that native people could stand together, resist together, never died. The Battle of Tippecanoe was not a decisive victory. It was a match struck in dry grass. It sparked a war. It buried a dream. And it opened a wound that would never fully heal. The forest remembers. The river remembers. And beneath the cornfields of Indiana, the bones remember too. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.